Hi, welcome to Marky Mark's Woodshop 101. I'm Amber.
And I'm Marky Mark, and this is the Woodshop. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about measuring, marking, and layout. Of course, one of the things in a wood shop, you got to have tools, and there's about 1,000,000 tools you need or will have, but you know, there's a lot of things you don't need to. They're kind of niceties. However, one of the basic things is measuring. Tape measure, of course. I get a lot of use out of yardsticks that are stainless steel. I've got them in various lengths, 1, 2, 3 feet. I started off with an aluminum one years ago when I was bent all up and the markings wear off, etc., etc. One of the other benefits of a stainless ruler is you can bend them. You get a nice circle for laying out an arc, and it doesn't lose its shape. So this happens to be a 3-foot one, and I've got one in 2 feet that I use a lot, and of course a 1-foot one. And the 1-foot one is actually from model railroading, so it's got all kinds of different types of measurements on it, and a lot of these go down to 64ths of an inch, which is on this particular ruler, along with different gauges for trains, and of course metric as well, millimeters, centimeters. So, and of course you get a nice straight edge for marking and layout. So again, there's a variety of stainless rulers. And you don't necessarily need a ton of them. If I were to have one, I'd probably get the 2-footer. This is a very large caliper for measuring larger boards, the width of them, or large rounds, perhaps logs, I don't know, whatever large it is you want to measure. You probably don't need one of these. I've only used this once or twice over the years. I picked it up cheap, had to have it. And this is aluminum. That's probably why it's in such good shape still. I've only used it once or twice. The smaller versions of calipers are much more useful. This one's a 6-inch, and they come in a variety of lengths as well, anywhere from 3 inches to a couple of feet. However, this size is going to be your most versatile size, and it'll measure very precisely the widths of whatever it is you want to measure. They're most particularly useful in something that's round. And it'll give you a very precise measurement. You can lock it in. They all have a little thumb screw to lock it. And it'll also do inside measurements and height as well. So they serve multi-purpose, although I generally 99% of the time I'm measuring an outside dimension. And this is an old caliper I used to use back in the days when I was a mechanic. And I've recently upgraded to a dial caliper, which I also have one in the reloading shop. It's basically the same thing, except it's a little easier to read because it has a dial on it for the finer dimensions. Reading this is very interpretive and hard to read. With the dial you get a very precise measurement. This particular one, usually they use inches down to 100th or 1,000th of an inch. This particular one measures in fractions, which is more useful for woodworking because everything in woodworking is a fraction of an inch. And it also has decimal, but I find this extremely useful with the fractions. And it works the same way. It just slides out and you can see the dial spinning. And wherever it stops, you know, it gives you your measurement. And this becomes extremely precise down to easily 1/128th of an inch, if not finer. Most of your woodworking 64th is good. There have been instances where 1/28 has been necessary. The more precise you are, the better off, because what happens is any little bit you're off gets magnified as you go. So if you're off a 32nd, by the time you're finished on whatever piece you might be making up, it could be off an 1/8, which gives you a horrendous gap. Calipers. They also make electronic ones, and they can be very cheap or very expensive. Harbor Freight has one, 30 bucks. It's as good as any. And most of them are Asian. The only one I know of that it says American made, Hornady makes an American one. It runs about 30 bucks if you want to keep your money on our shores. So, back to rollers. I've got a different supply of other rollers which serve dual purpose for measuring as well as layout. Most of these are Incra. This one's a foot, this one's 3 inches, and they make some other lengths. And you'll notice these have stops on them, which you can use against a flat edge. And one of the benefits, you notice these just have holes riddled all through them. All of the Incra rollers do, including ones that do not have stops. And I've got one that goes around the corner, so you can transfer your marks over a corner. And the way these will operate is they have a pencil, and you can use any pencil as long as the lead is 0.5 millimeters, which is very small, very fine, so you can put it in the hole and run it down a board, leaving a very precise measurement. And these are graduated in 30/2 of an inch as well. And these are very high quality, extremely accurate. And this little one I use a lot. So if I had to buy one, this would be it. They also make a protractor for angles, which quite frankly I don't get that much usage out of. But they do make that. And some other rollers include just a little machinist roller, which is great for transferring depths or heights rather, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the extreme near future. Here's another protractor, which in truth I don't use much either, but it'll give you your angle, which you can transfer. And some other little rollers. Here's another little machinist roller. This particular one is made by a company called Starrett. They make very, very high quality stuff too. They're a little pricey, but they're well worth it. And some other multi-use rollers, and they do all kinds of wonderful things. But one of the things I use these for that's unique is, these also serve as a center finding roller, and the center is 0. So what you can do is lay it up against whatever it is you want to measure and find the same measurement on either side and quickly find the center. So that's handy. And of course these have a stop as well. You can use either side. You don't have to have the stop. The stop actually screws off if you don't want to use it, but that's more handy than not. And another little addition for rollers is they make stops you can add to a roller very quickly. Just screws right on. So now I have a stop on that roller for whatever purpose I may want to use. And quite frankly, with all the other gizmos I've got, that doesn't see much use either. So it's a nicety, but not something you need to have. And some other measuring devices include a thickness gauge. This I use a lot. when it comes time to planing or cutting or whatever, you can very quickly and accurately get the thickness of whatever it is you want to measure. And this too is very accurate just because of its design. These run about $30–35. Gauge It is the only company that I've seen that makes these. It's well worth it. This is something that you'll use a lot of. And of course we have a variety of squares. A miter square. Of course you get your angles with it too, and they usually come with a little level, which of course level you don't use a lot of in the shop. Squares are another useful tool. This one I use a lot, and I've got these in various sizes as well. You can just slip them up against the edge and make a perfectly square mark, perfectly perpendicular. And of course you've got some measuring on here as well, but it's not as accurate as the rulers. But this is heavily used. And other squares, I've also got these in varying sizes as well. I don't use these as much, but of course they do come in handy. And I've even got a little fence that you can attach to any straight edge, any ruler, or you know, they're going to come in most handy in a square, so I can put that in there, lock it down, and now I've got another option to use as a square. I can hold that against and use it as a straight edge as well, and that makes one of these squares a little bit easier to use. And that's made by Veritas, the Super Fence, and they make some very high quality unique tools too. I've got various Veritas tools here and there. Another one is the miter square. Of course this has a little sliding affair here that gives you a couple of different angles, 90 and a 45. And they've also got a little bubble level, which you're not going to use too much in woodworking, but this is a pretty versatile tool. You can use it in construction as well. So that is the bulk of our measuring things. Also for layout, here's some other squares. Although some are marked with measurements, that one's very handy going along the 45, which is unique. But they can be more used for layout, 45s, 90s, and some other odd angles. These particular tools are made by Shinwa, Japanese company. They make very good stuff, and they're reasonably priced too. So another tool that's used for marking and layout is this scribe, where a pencil may not be as practical. You may want to cut the fibers of the wood, which this will do because it's very sharp. And in some cases, such as plywood, where you score it, it will help prevent tear out. So that's another advantageous tool. I don't use it a lot, but when you need it, you need it. And that's another tool made by Veritas, although other companies make that. Another layout tool, also Veritas, but other companies make that, is another way of running a line down a board instead of a square or the other rulers that we saw. This has a little cutting edge on it, and I can adjust it to wherever I like and run that down the piece, and it will do the same thing as I just showed you as a scribe. It will cut a line in either direction, whatever, against or with the grain, but it will scribe and cut the wood fibers in the same manner where you don't get as much tear out depending on what you're doing. And here's another little handy tool I've only used once or twice, also made by Veritas. This is unique. If you want to make a cut, this is mainly used for the table saw, but you can use it for layout. It simply has the number of sides of a particular piece. Maybe you're making something with 8 sides, an octagon. You can just use the 8 lay it down and mark it, and 8 sides happens to be 22.5 degrees, so that's exactly what that'll be. And it's got odd number of sizes too, 5, 12, some of these number of sides you don't normally use, but it's there. So that's another Veritas tool. And another one used for layout would be a profile gauge. A profile gauge will take a silhouette of what you're working on, and it can be very intricate. This is the most intricate thing I could find in the shop, at least within a minute or two. And you can use this for either tracing to duplicate it, or if you're trying to find that piece of molding, go to the hardware store, you can take this instead of a whatever 20-foot length of wood, and it'll work on any shape, any angle, for whatever purpose you may need to get a profile. They make bigger ones for construction, which are handy for layout, in case, say, you're putting down a vinyl floor and there's a pipe out a couple of inches and you have to cut around it, so you can use that for measuring where you want to cut that. So that can be a handy little item. These are available anywhere. Oh, one last little square. Again, I told you I had them in all kinds of shapes and sizes. This is a miniature one. This comes real handy it's got flat sides, and they make these in bigger sizes. When you go to glue up something, for example, you can use a square to make sure that your boards are perpendicular to one another. You can even clamp it down so it stays there during the glue up. One use. This particular one is made by Woodpeckers. I believe they're a small company in Ohio. They make very high quality stuff. So they're a bit pricey, but they're very well worth it. Some other layout tools for marking circles or edges, whatever. If I want to do something with a corner, if I want to radius it, I can do an inside radius and mark it. I can do chamfers. So there's an instant angle. It's a little bit easier and quicker to do. And I've got some even larger ones for bigger projects. Another handy layout gauge for transferring an angle quickly is a bevel gauge, and you can quickly get an angle, set it, and I can transfer it to whatever I might be working on. Well, this isn't going to work because it's obviously square, but as an example, if I had a weird angle such as that, I could very easily come and mark it. And these are very handy. I use this more in construction than woodworking, but again, if you're transferring an angle, it's the quickest way to do it. Lastly, how to deal with round stuff. So we have a dowel. How do you find the center? Very easy. Use a center finder. Now I can mark that. And I want to get 2 marks to make an X, like a little whatever. And there you go. Where the 2 lines meet, that's your very center. And on a drill press handling round items, it's a real pain in the butt. So how do you find the center and even hold the thing? Well, got this little gizmo you put in your drill press and put your piece under it, and you can see it going back and forth. There's little lines there that you want to line up, and that'll get you perfectly centered. So how do you hold a round piece while you're trying to get it centered? A block. Set it in there, it won't move. Now I can find my center and put it right under the drill press, and I'm done. So there you go. That's how you center the drill press on something round. That way you'll be perfectly centered. The last thing for measuring would be your chisels and your planes and all that good stuff, because you have to sharpen these, and there's special gauges that measure the angles because they always want to be at specific angles. So you can just stick your blade in there and check to see what angle it is, and then you can set your guide to do the sharpening. This is another way to do it. There's another piece that attaches. This will hold the chisel in place. Once you get it, determine the right angle, you can set it and then go to work sharpening it, because now you've got the proper angle to work with. So with that said, let's jump over to some tools and see just a couple more things for measuring. A couple other measuring devices are some height gauges, which become very important for things like setting your router or table saw height when you need that kind of precision. And in this case, I've got two different kinds. One, I just sit over top of it, and I can set my height to whatever I want by lowering the saw and referencing the increments. And this is kind of the same way with this one. It's just a different style where I can just go over it and find or set my height. In this case, it's 1 3/8. And again, you can use that for router bits as well. Anything you need to set a height above a work surface for, that'll work nicely. These are woodworking specialty tools, so you'd have to go to some place like Rockler or Woodcraft to get those. And the last thing for measuring, again, these are very precise. These are, you can use them for gauges to measure widths and such. These are brass. They're all different kinds of widths. In this case, they go from a 1/16 of an inch to a 1/2 inch, and you can use these for setting things such as the bandsaw blade width. I can put in whatever I want, set my fence, lock it down, and go cut my workpiece. And you can use this for table saws and just measuring. These can be used for a variety of things, from setting the width of something you might want to cut, as we've just seen, to using them to check the precision on some of your machines for whatever purposes. But they can come in handy. They're very precise. They don't change in size, which is real nice, so they become standards. So there's a variety of implements and tools to use for marking and layout. And don't forget, hit the subscribe button, like, leave a comment, and we'll see you again. Thanks for watching.